Welcome to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. In this episode, I'm joined by guest co-host Konnie Dobreva, and we feature Jenny Delumo. Jenny is a senior planner and transportation review team lead at the San Francisco Planning Department, where she reviews complex transportation projects for environmental impacts and works on transportation policy. In addition to transportation and environmental planning, she has experience in sustainable development, redevelopment, and interagency collaboration. Join us as we learn about Jenny's approach to leadership as an environmental professional. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, I'm Jessa, and my pronouns are she, hers.
Hi, I'm Konnie Dobreva. My pronouns are she, hers.
And today we have Jenny Delumo, who is a senior planner and transportation review team lead with the San Francisco Planning Department. Thank you so much for joining us, Jenny. We appreciate you having me.
Sorry for stepping over you.
No, you're fine. I was still going. I'm like, I don't.
Well, thank you for having me. And my pronouns are she, hers too.
Thank you. So Jenny, first things first, how are you connected to AEP?
I'm a member, and I have been since I think around the time I started at the planning department, which is around 8 years ago.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that long though, but it has been a long time.
How did you get connected with AEP? Like, what was the catalyst for joining?
When I started at the department, the first day they gave me a copy of the CEQA guidelines, and then an AEP conference, the annual conference is coming up. They're like, you should join. And when I signed up to come to the conference, it was like, you should join the association. So I did, and it's just such a wonderful resource, professionally, but also the opportunity to get to talk to other people around the state and hear what they're doing, what their challenges are and how they address them. I really do appreciate being part of the group.
Yeah, and you spoke, I know, at this year's conference. I was introduced to you by one of your colleagues, and I feel like you had one of the panels that had all the buzz at the conference.
Yeah, we, San Francisco, we're like a lot of other cities, and in some ways we get some unique challenges, and autonomous vehicles are one of them. So it felt like something that, folks might want to hear about, because, even if it's not there yet in your city, it might be coming soon. AV companies, they want to deploy, and they want to deploy broadly. So it was fun to bring together people to talk about, like, what is autonomous vehicles, period, and then how do you address that when you're thinking about environmental impacts? And we, luckily had a case study that we could use to, like, a real world case study to talk that through.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Can we get the Cliff Notes version, if you have like a 1 minute version of what that is for those that are listening?
Yeah. So there's a company, Cruise, and they have been testing autonomous vehicle passenger service in the state, not just San Francisco. And they came to us with a project where they wanted to site a place to not only charge their vehicles, but also maintain them and test them. And so this was like the first time we had a project like this come our way. And so we just evaluated what the impacts were. And I think, a lot of the focus in the panel when we were at AEP was like, okay, well, they're zero emission vehicles that they're testing. What does that mean in a world where VMT is so tied to greenhouse gas emissions? And these are vehicles that are not, in and of themselves at least, generating greenhouse gas emissions. So, we talked about, who has the regulatory authority over autonomous vehicles. It's DMV and CPUC. And then when it gets down to, the land use side of things, what does that look like when we're evaluating a project like this?
It's fascinating, and it's an interesting combination of where our industry is going as a whole is kind of the combination of sustainability and environmental planning, right? Sustainability is new. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm like, we could have a whole podcast on that.
Mhm.
But to tee that up, let's talk about you, Jenny, and your career and your passion for the environment. And so with your role, you mentioned that you've been with the department for 8 years, but what was your path like to get into this industry? And I know I can imagine it's a long story, but just kind of like, at what point did you start to get interested in the environmental field, and how did you carve your path to your position today?
Yeah, I think it started as a kid. I have a memory of coming home and explaining to my family what recycling was at a time when we did not have recycling as an option. So I'm dating myself. And then in high school, I joined the speech and debate team, and I started giving these speeches about the greenhouse gas effect. And they were probably too boring to be compelling, but it was fascinating to me. And so I think I always gravitated towards, whether in school or in work, ways that, I was in some way using my time to improve my environment. Um, and so I had done nonprofit development for a while, and then I went to grad school and really discovered urban planning. And when I got out, I was able to get a fellowship at the Environmental Protection Agency through this program. If there's anybody out there looking for fellowships, it's called ORISE. It's the Oak Ridge. I'm going to totally mess this up, but just look up ORISE. And they place people, whether they're in school or just getting out of school, in different federal agencies throughout the country, just doing like anything, any kind of work that they need. And so I got an ORISE fellowship at the EPA, and they put me in the Brownsfield office. And it's kind of funny that we didn't specifically do brownfields work. It was the HUD DOT EPA Partnership for Sustainable Communities, where we would try to harness the resources financially and otherwise of the three agencies towards sustainable redevelopment. And given that it was in Chicago, this is a Chicago office, it was a lot of the issues that Rust Belt cities face, which are very different from California. Declining population and what that means in terms of just vacant homes and vacant space, and lack of economic investment. But I think the thing that's similar to California is that, the leaders there, the people we're talking to about these projects, wanted to find a way to strengthen their communities and improve their environment. And it was just different tools that they used versus what we have here. So when I moved to California, I just started looking for jobs that tried to marry that idea of how do you tackle the environment, sustainability, and urban planning together?
And I'm sorry if I missed this, but where did you grow up, or where did you relocate from?
I was born in Chicago, moved to San Diego, moved to Sacramento, moved back to Chicago, and then moved back to California about 10 years ago.
I'm in San Diego, so
yeah.
I love it. And with that, is there anything, talking about that attracted you to the city of San Diego? Like you said, these Rust Belt cities have their own challenges. Were there challenges unique to San Francisco that attracted you to that city, or was it just kind of a natural progression as the opportunities arose for you?
It was more of a natural progression. I always wanted to come back to California.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants.
I'm from the Midwest. Wants to live.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm from the Kansas City area. So yeah, I won't grill you on that. I understand. And so you mentioned something. You mentioned sustainability, and I think that's been it's a buzzword, right? But there's meaning, and so I was wondering what your definition is of sustainability. How do you define that?
I don't know if I have a right answer or a good answer, but I think, when I was a kid, I just thought, oh, sustainability is we're going to recycle, and that's going to change things. And obviously that is not the case. We now know that, so little of what we do recycle actually can be recycled. And then I think when I got to college, I started to think about it in more austerity terms of how do I make the smallest impact I possibly can? on the environment, like going vegan, for example, or eating less meat. And then I think as I got older, it's more just about making informed choices where I have influence to make them. How do I make the smallest impact on the environment, but knowing that I can't do that, how do I use my money, my time wisely in a way that I'm a good steward of the environment? And that's not just like, that could be biking, when I could have driven, or that's just like, who do I give my money to? And where do they give their money to? Like, where do I have any sense of influence?
I love that. Like, I always think about that with spending is like vote with your dollars.
Yep, it's so true.
Are you a vegan?
No, I love cheese too much. I couldn't hold on.
That's like, I get that.
I had to eat cheese.
The Midwestern in you.
Exactly.
That's how I feel. I was thinking the other day, I was like, I'm like, I connect with veganism and I understand why it's good. And I want to do it, but the willpower and like, I don't even know where to start. So that's a hard jump.
I hear you. It's just like, let's do what you can. Like, no one's perfect. Nothing's perfect for everyone. There's no one solution. You just do what you can.
Yeah, I think that's such an important message. We actually had a guest on, it was probably about 6 months ago at this point, Cindy Lynn, and she also is from the EPA, or she had like had a career there at some point. And that was her message, was like, just be better than yesterday. Like, we don't have to solve the world in a day. So I think that's like, a thread that's coming up, is that these problems and challenges are very big and overwhelming. And so it's like, just like being a little bit better than yesterday and just like incrementally moving towards progress, as we can as individuals, while we also know that there needs to be some more significant change for some of the environmental challenges we face. But yeah, I think that's a great message. Like, do what we can.
Oh, yeah. I think it's especially relevant with, when we hear something about how well we're doing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and global warming and climate change. Sometimes it's all doom and gloom, and it is dire. It's like, it's truly dire, but also if people don't have hope or feel as if they're making progress, then sometimes you stop doing the things that are actually going to get you there. There's got to be some positivity, I guess.
Yes, I was just thinking about the article that came out about the Arctic sea ice that will disappear by 2030. I think that just came out this week, and it was like, it's too late. But anyway, okay, I'm going to stop that path and go down another one.
Sorry.
No, it's me. I'm like, so kind of in that context, though, like, there are some big challenges and it can feel defeating, but you're being in this profession and, you're a team lead. How do you take care of yourself to show up in the world and to lead these big initiatives and also, be a team motivator at the same time?
I think recognizing for myself and other people that we have lives outside of work, it can be all consuming. And sometimes we have deadlines or, priorities that we can't shut off, at whatever time we typically are supposed to shut our computers off. But whenever I have the opportunity to truly like let go, just be present with my family at home, not checking Teams or emails. I think that's my best self-care. And not only that, but like to your point of like maybe just turning off the news and not looking at my app and doom scrolling, just being present.
And so with that, I think, as a leader, you're setting an example, right, for those working underneath you. And so what are some of your leadership philosophies or practices, and like how you work with your team and, reflect like what you just said, like how do you show up at work and manage your team to instill kind of that approach as far as like moving things forward and projects, getting them completed, while also like respecting, the work-life balance, if you will?
Something I've learned from others, and I try to model, is coaching rather than always directing. Asking questions where I'm essentially letting the person know, like, I value your experience and your judgment. And so what do you think the solution is? And then I will support you in that solution. And sometimes, being like, are you looking for a solution for me? Because sometimes people are, or are you looking just to have a sounding board? So trying to honor that, everybody has some experience and knowledge, and they know a lot more than they think they do sometimes. And then trying not sending emails. Even if you're working late, don't send the email. Wait until the morning, don't give the impression that somebody needs to be on and read it at all hours. Like, even if that's something you need to do for yourself to meet a deadline, like, at least present that you're keeping those boundaries. And so others will feel comfortable keeping those boundaries too.
I think that brings up a really interesting point, which is, as a leader, right, when you're entry level at the organization, as you grow into it, one of the things I found is, right, thinking about how you come across and how you're perceived, because when you're up climbing the corporate ladder or paying your dues at work, right, you're answering emails, you're sending that late email to show that you work late, and how that shifts when you're in a position of leadership. So thank you for bringing that up, of looking at yourself from the eyes of your team, your younger team that is modeling how they should be showing up at work and in the world.
Yeah. And I think I've been lucky that I've had at the planning department some really great supervisors and mentors who helped me see that and modeled it themselves. Because it starts at the top too. So they help create that culture where we could do that.
I think that's so important about the email. And I think it's, I think of people or leaders who will say, well, I don't expect people to reply at that hour, or I just need to send it. But you're still sending that message, right? Of like, well, I'm doing this, and so this is okay. Like, this is acceptable. And I think especially as, when you have people working for you or who look up to you, it can be perceived as like, oh, well, they're doing this, so I should do this, or I want to show them that I'm responsive and I'm, online all the time and can get the job done. And so I think that's so important, is just to, like, even though you just want to send it, get it off your plate, is like, just draft it, send it in the morning, set the automatic send, 8 a.m. But, coaching yourself, if you will, to practice those behaviors.
Jenny, how big is the team that you lead?
I think, how many are there? Yeah, I should know this offhand. We fluctuate, but there's about 8 of us on the transportation team.
The reason I ask is, what are some of the ways, as you're over, 3 or 4 people, what are some of the ways in which you stay connected with your team in terms of sort of that personal leadership, leadership building within your team, right? Because we're in an unprecedented time of how busy we are in the environmental field in the last 5 years or so. So what are some of the ways in which you can share with other leaders on how you stay connected with your team?
Yeah, I think, so we have biweekly meetings, and we try to, we have the, serious, like, here are updates and here's changes to the process, but then we try to keep it fun at the end. Like, there's a moment where we can just digress or share something we learned that doesn't have to be work related. And, we try to be mindful of people's time. And like you said, people are busy. So if there's nothing to share, we'll cancel the meeting. But we try not to do it too often, because it's a chance to connect. And then we'll also have check-ins where the purpose is to, like, talk about how are things going with your project, but also it's another coaching opportunity of, like, are we helping meet your needs? Am I helping meet your needs in terms of the professional development you want to see, and, like, how you're being supported in the projects you have now? So I think, like, having regularly scheduled check-ins, which I'm sure many people do, is one way. But I would say focusing on coaching, and then just an opportunity to talk and have an interpersonal, build an interpersonal relationship that's not, just about the work.
I mirror that. I think that it's so important. The most rewarding relationships in work, or even with colleagues like yourself, once we getting to know people, that's one of the tips that I always give to young professionals is you don't always have to get on the phone and just stick to being professional. You don't need to get down to brass tacks right away. Get to know the human being across from you, across the line, get to know who they are. It makes our work so much more enjoyable if you know something about the person that you get to deal with at an agency or at another firm, at a sub-consultant. I think that I see that a lot in younger staff. They think they have to be professional all the time, and there's this really bright line between who you are at work and your personal interests. And I think this is it's one of the things I try and instill in them. It's okay. It's okay to get to know people. It's okay to. I think in fact it helps us have a richer life.
Yeah, that is so true. It's like you should be able to bring your whole self to work.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to be authentic at work, and it also helps build trust. And that trust comes in handy when you're working. You understand better where somebody's coming from when you have that level of trust.
I was just having this conversation earlier this week because if you are having, challenges at home, that's going to be brought into work. And if you're having challenges at work, that's going to be brought home. And so I think, the conversations around like the whole self, like seeing people as a whole person and not just like you are in this role, this is what you do, stay in your lane, but, having compassion and conversations and discussions, because I think, for example, if there were performance issues, is that a lack of motivation, engagement, competency, or is there some distraction and stress outside of the day-to-day that is impacting that individual? And how can you support them to balance that? And I think it kind of depends on when and where you kind of came up in your career and at what stage you are, because they're so long where it's like, so, like you're saying, like you have to be professional and stoic and, be like, dear sir, madam, and regards, and not feel that. And I think I'm so happy to hear like so many leaders. And I think it seems to be, I don't know, but the people we talk to on here are very, compassionate and, work on that soft skill side as well as the technical side. So I just appreciate that you do that.
No, you guys are both so on it with this because, things happen, in the world. There's constant stress and trauma and, and just being able to stop and acknowledge that like something's going on out there. And if you need a moment or you need a day to process that, then that's okay. I feel like that's something that I know I didn't have when I was first starting working, like a mental health day. Like people would say it, but no one would actually say it.
I had a lot of like stomach aches at my first job.
But now it's acknowledged to be like, this is something you need to do to recenter yourself and come back to work. You should be able to have the time to do that.
I'm a firm believer in that. And I do find, I think you bring up a good point. There is somewhat of a generational of how you came up, like who were your mentor? There's this sort of this grueling, I did it, I had to go through it. I never got to take mental health days. So, you can do it too. And that's one of the things in leadership. I think it's important for us to constantly reimagine what leadership is in our positions, and we're the ones that get to do that.
Yeah.
Because we can bridge the gap between a young generation that has different ideas of how they want to work and what brings value to their lives, and a slightly older generation that may have a completely different set of ideas of how you show up to work. And we're sort of in that area, and as emerging leaders and leaders in the area leading teams, we get to bridge that gap between supervisors and up and coming staff. So I love hearing, I hear that. I love hearing that we're all thinking about, when my staff or my team comes to say, I really need a mental health day, it makes me so happy, and it makes me smile, and it means that they're really aware of how they're showing up at work.
Yeah. I had someone ask about that recently. They're like, I just need a day, like a mental health day. And it's weird because I take it, yeah, like you said, it's like I kind of take it as a compliment. Like, oh, I've fostered this environment where someone feels comfortable saying this. So yay, Jessa. And I was thinking kind of in these terms of what you're saying, Connie, too, is that a lot of my management style and the way I show up is I think about what I had managers in some of my first jobs do. And I'm like doing the opposite of that. I'm like, what did I not like about that? Like I kind of learned, the hard way. So it's like, Jenny, you're saying like you've had a lot of amazing leaders and mentors with your department now. And I'm kind of, I don't want to say I haven't, that's not fair, but I think I look back to the ones that I were not a good example. And I'm like, what did they do that I didn't like? And how am I going to do that differently? But kind of, I wanted to come back to something you said earlier, or talking about kind of more earlier in your career. Like it sounded, from an early age, you've had a passion for, started with recycling, and it's led you to working with one of the largest or cities in the country, and on some big issues. And and you mentioned some of these programs. You mentioned ORISE. Like, how did you learn about all this? Like, did you have strong educators, mentors in your life as far as kind of helping this path? Were you just doing the research and passionate and focus on what you wanted to do? Like, how did you learn about these opportunities and these different paths?
Good friends and yeah, good mentors who looked out for me for opportunities. For ORISE, I was actually doing an internship in Chicago, and one of the intern coordinators said, "Hey, I know someone at the EPA who's looking for help through this program. I think you would be good, and your internship's going to end soon, so you should apply." And sometimes it's unfortunate that you can't just have all the resources there and see a job opportunity and go for it and get it. But sometimes it's just about talking to people and having someone look out for you and point you in the right direction.
I think mentorship is so critical. And a lot of the, hearing your story and some other individuals we've had on the podcast, having strong mentors is such a key to getting on the right path and to advancing on that path. And so AEP has launched a mentorship program, which we encourage everybody to participate in. Go to the website. But also, what's your advice for people to find a mentor and or to be a mentor? Like, how does that relationship become established?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would encourage formalizing it in your organization, advocating for formalizing it in your organization to the extent that, your time at being either the mentor or the mentee is valued and paid for. Because I think mentoring, or I should say providing opportunities for that, is a form of supporting the entire organization that you work for. People who feel supported, engaged, like they're growing, they want to stay. And they want to grow and they want to give whatever they learn back. So I think, advocating for it to be formal, and then informally, if you just, and I'm not saying I'm the best at this, but if you see someone you admire, just tell them and ask them questions. I think people are more open to that than you would think, and it's awkward for the introverts among us. But just send an email, do a call, go to an AEP conference and go up to someone and say, I'm really curious how you got where you are. And I'd love to learn more. And sometimes the relationship can form from there. And I say asking for it. I personally asked for coaching and mentorship from my supervisors as part of my regular check-in, and I got it. And I think, we just have to be advocates for ourselves as much as we possibly can. And hopefully that will, either filter into the culture of your organization. Maybe it won't, but at least you asked.
Yeah, and I think you really brought up a very interesting point too, which is there is a difference between somebody who's championing for you and somebody who's a mentor for you. And sometimes we have to show up. The person who said, "Hey, I can connect you with somebody at the EPA," maybe it wouldn't be somebody that you would have an ongoing mentorship relationship with, but there's somebody who's really a champion for your success. And I think that leaves opportunities where we don't have time for long-term mentorships. In environmental careers, we can help connect people, right? The importance of being a connector, I think, is sometimes underscored. How quickly you can change the course of somebody's life just by connecting them to the right internship or the right person in the right field.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's, a mentorship should be a relationship, and hopefully a long-term one. And sometimes you just need someone to point you in the right direction. And they're different things. Yeah.
And so kind of with this, like, how does your department, so the San Francisco planning department, how do you take care of your people? So, you had some suggestions and are talking about like advocating for a mentorship program. What are some things that your department facilitates for your people?
So we have this amazing wellness team actually that took off during the pandemic lockdown and is still going. And they do the typical things you think of when you think of self-care. We'll have like stretch breaks. And even before the pandemic, we would get together, and if folks wanted to like work out during the lunch hour, could do that. But then they also do stuff that's just around bringing people together outside of in the office, but outside of like a work specific thing. So we had like, they organized a plant swap. You bring your plant cuttings and swap it, a clothing swap, things like that. So that's something department wide that I really appreciate that our department does.
That's awesome. So like the wellness program is not just, I think about it in more physical wellness, but it's again, like kind of the whole person.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
And is it like an employee-led, volunteer-led program?
Yeah, it is. And like, but it's time, like it's paid time that you get to stop and 15 minutes, come stretch, talk to other people, come grab a plant.
It's great. It's a great idea.
I know. I love that. That's cool. So Jenny, what's your dream for the environmental profession? Like where it's going? Like what would you like to see happen?
I think the work we do, and I think most people recognize it as being an essential part of decision making, of the decision making process. And I'm talking specifically around like, development projects or infrastructure projects or whatever. But I think that's not always the case. And my dream is like people recognize this as not just a box to be checked or a cudgel to be wielded. It's integral to making projects better. Like it's not just a side piece of the work we do as planners in the city, but it makes that project actually better when we stop and we think about like, what are we doing? What is our impact on the environment? How can we make it better?
And we were talking about this a little bit before you started, and about, you were talking about some streamlining initiatives. And is that a component of what you just mentioned? Do you think that streamlining is part of that? Like, why are we doing this, and what are its impacts? Or is that a separate issue?
I think it's both. I think sometimes streamlining can be a scary term for folks when they think about environmental review of projects, because it sounds like we're just, moving forward and not stopping and thinking about all the, 21 topics or so that we have on the checklist. But really what it is being, and in this case, the housing element, is that we did take a look at, what does it mean to implement the housing element? What are those impacts? How can we mitigate them? And then now that we know that, if a project comes in, like we've started that process of the analysis and we can evaluate it. more efficiently and expeditiously than we could before. So yeah, it's, I think some people hear streamlining and they think that like it's that box to be checked, or I don't like it, and so there's that cudgel I could wield. But really, it's about trying to protecting the environment while also addressing our housing crisis, and doing that as expeditiously as we can.
Yes. Well, I think that's a great bullet point to wrap up on. I mean, you summed it up. I think some very challenging and complex issues very clearly and easy to understand. So thank you for that. So yeah, we'll get into our wrap up rapid five, unless there's anything else that you'd like to mention before we wrap up.
Yeah.
All right, Konnie. Okay.
Oh, for the rapid fire? No, there's nothing. I think I want to thank you for the way that you wrapped it up. My question was going to be to end on, which is, how is it that you still stay connected to the environmental profession? You mentioned that we really are most of what we do is in support of that development process and improving it, but it is in support of decision makers. And my question was going to be, how is it and I guess maybe I can still ask the question. I think you wrapped it up, but what's some of the ways in which you still connect with the environmental profession, right? Is outside of just supporting development or decision makers, which sometimes, right, can be in conflict with protecting the natural environment. And you spoke a little bit to that, which is actually marrying those two, finding ways to protect the natural environment while still facilitating development. But what are some of the ways in which you still stay connected to that environmental purpose in your career?
That's such a good and hard question. I
think you talked a little bit about that, right? The streamlining, I heard a little bit of educating the public, right, of what our purpose really is as a part of your dream. I heard a little bit of that.
Yeah. I do think like the opportunities that we have to talk to people about projects, we notice when a project's going to happen, and like, I've been getting emails about one the last couple of days, and it's really an opportunity to explain what CEQA is, what it isn't, how we can help, and to take those considerations seriously as we think about, what are we looking at in our environmental review. I do think that like one of the things I enjoy the most about my job is when I get to talk to the public. And I know that sounds insane, but because I know some people don't, but it's like, we're in our world, our CEQA world, and we know the acronyms and we know like the significance thresholds and, but when you actually get to stop and talk to someone about like, yeah, you've got concerns and this is how we think about them in CEQA. And, maybe we didn't think about this thing that you brought up. And so I'm going to go back and consider that. Like, that's a really rewarding part of the job.
Answers the question perfectly.
Great. Well, we'll wrap up with the softball questions now. Just the hardest question, now the easiest ones. Okay, wrap up rapid five. What is your favorite daily habit?
Okay, when my son gets home or I get home and he's already home and I get to hear about his day. It's just hilarious. Because
how old is he?
He's 5. And so, I mean, these are 30-second conversations, but like 5-year-old drama is real. They have clicks. And so, yeah, I love getting updates.
Oh, I love that. What are 3 things you would bring to a deserted island?
If people count, then definitely my immediate family. So my son and my husband, and then music and books. I couldn't live without that. So all of my music and books.
Some loopholes there.
Yeah.
What is your favorite environmental policy?
That was a hard one. I think policies that make it easier to facilitate facilitate density. And this is definitely coming from a San Francisco perspective, but things that remove those barriers, like removing single family zoning controls, because not only does it promote density, which we know can reduce VMT and its associated effects, but it's also a form of redress because it's in the past been used as an exclusionary tool.
It's an excellent point.
Yeah. What is your favorite flora or fauna?
Probably flora. I turned into a pandemic plant parent, so I've got plants everywhere.
You bring in your plant clippings to share?
I brought some in.
Oh, there you go. Do you name your plants?
No, but now I should.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it, but I don't have, I can't hang on to them long enough to name them. Okay. And then finish this thought. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Environmental protection, if it was so ingrained in society that it wasn't like a goal or priority we had to single out. It was just something we did. It's just something we do.
I love that. Well, thank you so much again, Jenny. It's wonderful to have you. We appreciate your time and insight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jenny. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.